While many happy couples were frittering away their Valentine's Day on luxuries like love and romance, you'll be happy to know that I spent the day hard at work in the vault. We all measure productivity in our own ways, although it's not as though alcohol affects me anymore, sadly. Despite my attempted inebriation and my crippling sense of solitude, I managed to dig another anime film out of the archives to revisit. A futuristic sci-fi piece titled Appleseed. Like Ghost in the Shell, this was a movie I remember watching in the early days of my anime hobby. I recall it being pretty entertaining, so I thought it was time to give it a rewatch and see if that's still the case. Or if my memories had decayed as much as my liver. In the distant future, civilization has been devastated by a new global war. Dunin Newt, a talented young veteran, is plucked from the battlefield and brought to Olympus, the last remaining city and a beacon of hope. Olympus's population is a mix of human and bioroid, an artificial humanoid race, and anti-bioroid hostility brews beneath the veneer of peace. When a terrorist attack threatens all bioroid life, Dunin and her cyborg boyfriend Briarios must recover a precious packet of data labeled the Appleseed to end the conflict, a conflict far more personal to Dunin than she could have predicted. Seeing as both Appleseed and Ghost in the Shell are based on manga written by Shiro Masamune, I can't help but notice some common elements in the two titles. Keep in mind that I have yet to read either manga, though. I'm only going by what I've seen in the movies. Both stories are set in a future of science fiction. Both stories feature a mixture of dystopian and scientifically advanced environments. Both stories also star battle-ready female leads with oversized right-hand men. Both stories also have great soundtracks. And both stories explore the shrinking separation of man from machine as well as the growth of artificial sentience. But while Ghost in the Shell spends most of its time on scientific and philosophical contemplation, Appleseed is a more direct action movie. Don't be mistaken, there's still plenty of world building and political intrigue to follow, but the movie is fairly straightforward in delivering those details, so you're less likely to get lost while keeping track of them. And because it's a more action-oriented story of terrorists versus society instead of a complex criminal investigation, the twists and turns aren't quite so confusing. We also have a more emotionally open lead in Dunin as opposed to the stoic and reflective Motoko. Dunin's clearly confident, almost cocky in her battlefield abilities, and she's very direct in her approach to people. But she also has a warmer side that becomes visible where family or close friends are concerned. I just wish her romance with Briarios was more developed. The man's forced to keep his distance for most of the movie, to Dunin's clear frustration, and he only opens up to her near the end. Oh well, I guess I'll just have to read the manga to see more of this. The movie is also animated entirely through CG, which is going to be an acquired taste for some. It's certainly impressive to see in action, but everything is almost too polished. It lacks the texture and sense of tangibility you see in more traditional animation. That being said, it does nothing to hinder the expressiveness of the cast, except for one obvious case, and the fluidity of the action scenes holds up remarkably well for being over 20 years old. Oh yes, shapely cyber ladies with razor whips are always welcome guests around here. Moving on, one more element of Appleseed that separates it from Ghost in the Shell is its overall brighter tone. It's made clear that the world has been ravaged by war, but almost all of the runtime is spent in Olympus, a shining beacon of peace and prosperity. And despite the apprehension, and even hostility, between humans and bioroids, peaceful coexistence is ever present as an entirely attainable goal. Even one of the major antagonists relents in his anti-bioroid sentiments near the end. Ghost in the Shell made no secrets about the potential for humanity to abuse or attack cyborgs and artificial intelligences, and it also remained vague on the future of humanity in an increasingly cybernetic world. But Appleseed focuses more on our ability to understand and live alongside a new race, while ending on a note of optimism. Objectively, I would acknowledge Ghost in the Shell as a higher quality story. Personally, though, I enjoyed Appleseed just a bit more for its more straightforward approach and brighter tone. Much like Ghost in the Shell, Appleseed has talented voice actors in both the Japanese and English casts. But if I had to give a preference, I would choose the Japanese track. It sounded just a little more natural to me in the dramatic moments. I'm only comparing it to Janaeon's English dub from 2005, though. It's my understanding that Sentai Filmworks released a second English dub some years later, so I may have to revisit this if I discover another copy in the archives. Appleseed has been released in the standard formats of DVD and Blu-ray, with the dubs from Janaeon in 2005 and Sentai Filmworks in 2010, so it's not too difficult to locate. Depending on which edition you're looking for, though, it can get pretty pricey. Be warned. But if you can find a copy, I suggest holding on to it. It makes for a good action flick to keep on the shelf. Thank you for joining me in this brief look into the archives of my vault. If this story interests you, please feel free to like this video and to comment on what you enjoy about it. And if you would be kind enough to share this video, it will not only help my channel to grow, which I appreciate, but it will bring more attention to these older or lesser known works.